Kia ora and welcome to the Niggly Newscast. I'm the Diggity Doodah Dr. Peptoy Panther here with the Wobbly Wildcard. We are going to flow into a bit of a Blackcaps T20 discussion now that the Blackcaps have wrapped up their tour of Sri Lanka. They played 3 T20 games, so we'll just wrap up, not necessarily wrapping up what happened against Sri Lanka. I want to use that as a platform just to discuss the wider Blackcaps T20 situation, because T20 will be a prominent feature over the summer, especially with that World T20 coming up. So there are a few interesting players that performed well and didn't perform so well in Sri Lanka. So I want to talk about those guys and how they project into the future. Wobbly Wildcard is here to help me. Wobbly Wildcard, how go thee?
Thou goest fine, I suppose. Fine. Fine's a good word.
Just a bit of fine. Now, every week, the Wobbly Wildcard offers us a couple of flying Kiwis from the world of football that have caught his eye, caught his ears, caught his senses in all regards. From the weekend's footy, Wildcard writes about the Flying Kiwis every week, so go check that out if that's your buzz. Otherwise, Wildcard, who are your picks this week for the Flying Kiwis?
Yeah, a couple very exciting picks this week. We've got Rhea Percival and Olivia Chance, two Football Ferns internationals, who played very well at the last World Cup, who last couple days ago, actually, just this very past weekend, kicked off the new season in the WSL, the Women's Soccer League in England, which is certainly one of the fastest growing women's football leagues on the planet, if not the strongest. I think it probably is the strongest, to be honest, in terms of, like, there are teams in Spain and Germany and even America where you know, the very top teams, France, obviously, the very top teams are perhaps at a higher level than the very top teams in England, but England, like 1 through 11 or whatever they're up to, the depth there, like the competition is very strong there. We saw over the last weekend, like, there's a Manchester derby where Manchester City, who were bloody excellent last year, have been very good for the last 3 or 4 years against a newly promoted Manchester United team in their second year of existence. And it was only 1-0 to City, and it was an absolute rocket of a goal that was scored. So you see how competitive the league is. We've got 2 New Zealanders in there this year. One is Rhea Percival playing for Tottenham Hotspur. She transferred from West Ham in the off-season, moving cross town to Spurs. She played defensive midfield for Tottenham in their season opener against Chelsea, which was played at Stamford Bridge. There are a few games this weekend that were played because there was an international break for men's football, so they were played at Premier League grounds where they could. And this was one of them, so playing at Stamford Bridge in front of 25,000 people, pretty fun experience. She gave up the ball in about the 3rd minute or something like that, and it was a bit of a hospital pass, in fairness, and Beth England for Chelsea just smacked it into the top corner, and that turned out to be the only goal. So a bit of a bummer of a way for it to actually start, but other than that, played pretty well. Like, it's always good to see Rhea Percival in midfield where she gets to, like, just win a bunch of tackles, and if she doesn't win the tackle, she's damn sure going to give away the foul. So entertaining one to watch there. I watched that whole game, actually, on replay, which was good fun. And you can watch them nice and easily because the FA have done this absolutely bloody brilliant thing where they've got this, they call it the FA Player, I think it's called, the FA Player, the app which they've put out, which is going to live stream all of the WSL games and I think one championship level game each week as well, which is cool because Katie Rood's playing for Lewis in the championship as well, so now and then she might be on New Zealand screens as well, so that's not geo-blocked if there's no current broadcast deal in your country, so it's global. For New Zealand, there is no WSL broadcast deal, there's no women's football at all on the Sky Sports football channel that I've seen so far, but so it goes. It's better this way if that we get to stream the WSL games this way, because it's a very good app, man. You just got to sign up for a little just make an account basically. It's completely free other than that, which is excellent. I don't know why more sporting leagues don't do this kind of thing, man. It's so good. It's so it's like, this is how you promote your league. This is how you get exposure and grow fans and all these things, and ultimately make more money down the line. So yeah, fantastic there. And also Olivia Chance playing for Bristol City. They played. Oh, I'm gonna have to look this up now because I've forgotten. But she only signed for them like in the week of the game, like a week before the game started, and she came off the bench, didn't start, but did get a good run, sort of where were we, 68th minute substitute, so that was cool. It ended 0-0. They were playing against Brighton, so not a fantastic result, but a solid result. A point on the board, you take that early on, considering that Olivia Chance was far from the only player to have only signed for this team recently. They've actually made quite a few late signings before the season, so not ideal preparation for them, and you might have to learn a bit on the fly as that one goes. But yeah, that's cool. She played for Everton last year, but only played only a handful of minutes because she was recovering from that knee injury that she had the season before. Real breakout year for her, so it was bit of a bummer that the injury came at the time it did. Like, it's always a bummer when you get injured for long term, but it's when her career was on such a spike. But yeah, she came back, played very well at the World Cup, surprisingly excellent at the World Cup actually, considering the injury she was coming back from, and great to see her bounce back with another WSL contract straight away. So yeah, hopefully big things from both Rhea Percival and Olivia Chance in the WSL this season, and for once New Zealanders can actually watch it thanks to the bloody little FA app, so sweet as there.
Big it up to any sporting organisation willing to take their broadcasting into their own hands.
A little initiative, eh? A little initiative. Goes a long way.
2019. Why not just give it a gander? Blackcaps in Sri Lanka wildcard, and there are a bunch of good performances. Tom Bruce, Colin de Gronholm, they were among the leading run scorers for Aotearoa. Ross Taylor, Mitchell Santner also played interesting roles with the bat. Tim Southey loves a bit of Sri Lanka. He was the leading wicket taker. And then Mitchell Santner was also highly consistent with the ball throughout the series. I'm going to start off in a bit of a... Yeah, well, as I said, I just want to talk about more individuals and what is coming up, because Colin Munro didn't have a great series in Sri Lanka. He scored 25 runs at an average of 8.33, and this is reflective of his 2019 performances. He's played 7 games this year, and he's averaging 22. Now, if you're averaging 22 with a strike rate of 160, that is okay in T20 cricket, because ultimately what matters most is your strike rate. But the issue here for Colin Munro is that it's a severe dip in run scoring from his last few years, because in 2016 he was averaging 33 with a strike rate of 152. In 2017, he was averaging 39.57 with a strike rate of 163. So the strike rate stays roughly the same throughout this. And then in 2018, he had an average of 45.45. So 2016, 2017, 2018, he was averaging over 30 with a good strike rate. Now in 2019, he's averaging 22 with a good strike rate. And we don't need to look too far beyond that Sri Lanka series to get a more reinforced vibe. Like, Colin Munro wasn't exactly hugely effective at the World Cup. And last summer he was... Well, ultimately, last summer he was so mediocre that he eventually got dropped. And they experimented with Henry Nicholls opening the innings. This was meant to be Colin Munro's time to shine. T20 cricket in Sri Lanka. Here we go. Colin Munro's going to whack it. He's going to, Martin Guptill only played 1 game, I think. 2 games, but only batted once I think is actually what happened. Yeah, only batted once. So Colin Munro's got all the opportunities. He's the big dog at the top of the order, and he doesn't do anything. So how are you viewing Colin Munro's position in the Blackcaps as a T20 opener and an ODI opener? Because like this might sound harsh, and I don't usually like to get this dramatic, but there's not many teams around the world at the moment. I just can't think of another situation where a player is performing as an international career with such mediocre stats. Do you get my drift there, Wildcard?
Yeah. One of the Sri Lankan test openers had rubbish stats going back ages. I forget which one. But anyway, Colin Munro as an ODI opener, I think, is irrelevant at this point. I think that ship has sailed. If he couldn't do it at the World Cup, he's not going to do it at the next World Cup. So I think we move on at this point, and he might have played his last ODI for New Zealand, and that wouldn't be the worst thing because obviously he's had his chances. Now, as a 2020 player, he has, like you said, he had 3 years of just being pretty excellent. Like, those are quite world-class numbers, really, in 2020 internationals. Struggling at the moment, though. And struggling at the moment, I think you give him the benefit of the doubt because he's got runs on the board in recent times, and I would highly suspect that while he might have struggled against Lasith Malinga doing crazy things with the ball, and in Sri Lankan conditions, been on tour for a little while. Munro, obviously not as long as most of all their test guys, but yeah, it's not easy in that situation. And while he would have expected to do a lot more, I think you can't write him off after 3 ODIs. It is a bit troubling that it goes back a little further than that, but I suspect that in home conditions against England, and it might not even be a top strength. Well, it'll be an England 2020 team, so it won't look anything like their current test team, for example. But yeah, we've got 5 2020s in November against England, and I suspect he's going to get a couple big scores in that one just because is that not just perfect for Colin Munro? You're going to be playing against English seam bowlers in New Zealand conditions. They're just going to set it up for him. So yeah, I think he'll be alright by then. Whether that is an indication that he can then go to Australia and be successful in a year's time at the 2020 World Cup, that's a different story. And if he doesn't do it against England, I think you're in a little bit of a situation where you say this drought of form is starting to extend longer than we're comfortable with, and you gotta start scoring some runs sooner or later, or else we got other guys who are knocking at the door here. But I think the general trend of the Blackcaps anyway is to give the benefit of the doubt to the experienced players. So I don't think he's in trouble at the moment. As a 2020 player, as an ODI player, I think we're done there. As a 2020 player, I don't think he's in trouble at the moment, but he has left himself vulnerable to where if he's not successful against England, he's going to have some questions asked about him, I think.
Well, so you do think that he's done as an ODI opener?
How could he not be? He's not going to... If you're thinking with the next World Cup in mind, then no thank you, because it's 4 more years, and they invested with him for a while. They tried to get him to be the new Brendan McCullum, pinch hitter at the top of the innings, and he just consistently failed to deliver. His stats are terrible for an ODI opener, so how could you go back to that when other people deserve a chance at this point? I mean, if everyone else fails, maybe he comes back around, maybe it swings back to him, the wheel keeps turning, but at the moment, I don't see a way back for him in that ODI squad, no. Not that we play an ODI for another 4 months.
Yeah. So let's not talk about the ODI squad. Because I was wondering, do you see any other changes as far as ODI cricket goes, and who would you open with?
Well, I think one thing that's interesting with the ODI squad there is you've also got to get Martin Guptill in some form. And Martin Guptill's record takes precedent over Colin Munro's, and you can't have 2 guys struggling. So, yeah, I don't know. I think at the moment they're probably quite happy with Guptill and Nichols. But the home series, or the home summer, if they were actually playing any decent amount of ODI cricket, would have been a perfect time to start to make the shift, because one World Cup's done, we're building towards the next one immediately. But I don't think we don't play an ODI until India are here, early, is it February next year, I think. So not ideal for trying to figure out those things. But yeah, it's the Blackcaps way, isn't it, to just go with the steady guys. So I think the incumbents right now are Guptill and Nichols, who opened in the World Cup final. So I don't think they're going to change anything in that regard.
I am
not immediately anyway.
There is another player that I want to put into the spotlight, but I am
Here we go.
Curious. We do have domestic cricket starting up, so we can start talking about cricket with that domestic cricket context around it. And typically Colin Munro, I mean, he might be the best domestic cricket player we've ever seen. Like, the dude is a freak in domestic cricket. He's got great statistics, a great strike rate across all the formats. Let me just double check this here. First class cricket, Colin Munro's strike rate of 98. List A cricket, Colin Munro's strike rate of 111. So Colin Munro has typically been a bully at domestic cricket level, churning out runs and doing so in a typical Colin Munro fashion. And I'm not sure how the calendar, how the schedule lines up, but you could see Colin Munro play a few games for Auckland at the start of the Plunket Shield. And that's going to be very interesting just to see how Colin Munro performs, because maybe he doesn't perform. And if Colin Munro is not performing at the Plunket Shield level, then you would know that there might be a loss of confidence or a elongated drop in form, and that would be greater reason for concern. Now, if Colin Munro comes out in the Plunket Shield where he's averaging 51 with a strike rate of 98, and Colin Munro plays Plunket Shield cricket in that fashion, I can definitely see him just sticking into all Blackcaps cricket teams, ODI, T20, not the Test team obviously, but though I can see him holding on to his Blackcaps spot, but there will be reason to be concerned if Colin Munro, who has traditionally done very, very well at the Plunket Shield level, if he can't quite do so well to start the summer in Plunket Shield, I think there could be a bit of a yarn going on there, Wildcard.
There would certainly be a bit of a yarn going on there. I mean, he's got a little bit of that, not completely, because like we were saying, he has actually scored some good runs at 2020 level, basically, not much at ODI level, but like he has been an international caliber player at least one of the three formats. So he's not completely Matthew Sinclairitis here, but there's a little bit of that where it's like too good for domestic level, not quite good enough for international level. Certainly as an ODI player, I think that's true about him.
Any other batsmen who tickled your fancy from that T20 Blackcap series wildcard?
Well, I mean, shout out to Hamish Rutherford on getting the late, little lifeline into international cricket after a little while out, and then he comes in and gets a golden duck. So sometimes you got to be careful what you wish for, I suppose. But mate, imagine facing Lasith Malinga in that kind of shape. Like, what are you going to do? Him and was it Munro? I think the first two wickets, not ideal batting. Munro especially, just stand there with his concrete feet and swing the bat and miss between bat and pad. But like the deliveries he bowled to Colin de Gronholm and Ross Taylor were just unplayable. What are you gonna do if you just got to cop it and say, well, okay, you got me, mate, you got me. Like that's there's no way I'm getting a bat on that. Like they look like they're drifting down leg and then swinging back in towards straighten it up and catch you on the pad or whatever. It's like it's unplayable.
Sit on your bat, like whatever.
Yeah, right. Go like French cricket, eh?
The Rutherford situation is actually far more intriguing and interesting than it seems, because ahead of the World Cup, Rutherford was playing county cricket in England, I think with Worcestershire, and then he ditched that to go be part of the New Zealand kind of wider one-day group that played 3 games against Australia. I think he only played 2 of those games, and then so he flew from England to go to Australia, and then he went from Australia back to England. So that's already happened this year. Now he is with, I think he was wrapping up the T20 competition in England, and he left that. They had a game, they had like a quarter-final game, and he had to leave that to go to Sri Lanka to play one T20 game. And now he's gone back to Worcestershire to play county championship. So Hamish Rutherford is just getting like run around the world, and it seems a bit unnecessary. I assume that Hamish Rutherford wants to play as much as he can for New Zealand, and he's going to make himself available, which is cool. And he doesn't have to pay for any of his flights or anything like that, and he's getting paid to play for New Zealand, and Worcestershire seem to be all good with it, so no dramas there. But flying Hamish Rutherford across the world for one T20 game seems a bit unnecessary, although it's apparently a shorter trip from New Zealand. But from that, I am interested in, the future of Hamish Rutherford as a Blackcap. I highlighted his success in Ford Trophy and Plunket Shield last summer. Super Smash was his weakest format last summer, and now he's in the mix for white ball cricket. Do you see, what's your over-under kind of figure on how many more games Hamish Rutherford plays for New Zealand? Because he's one of those players who could get overtaken by the young wave that we've talked a lot about on these Nichecast episodes. Alternatively, Hamish Rutherford could come back to domestic cricket this summer in Aotearoa and just command Blackcaps selection by dominating across all formats, which for someone like Hamish Rutherford is possible. He can dominate across all three formats. Glenn Phillips can dominate across all three formats in domestic cricket. Devon Conway from Wellington did dominate across all three formats in domestic cricket. So there are these players who have the skills that can transfer between the three formats, and most importantly, the mental nous to be able to execute across the formats. So how are you viewing Hamish Rutherford at the moment? He is a very capable batsman who could have a career resurgence or fall away and be overtaken.
Yeah, I mean, he's, like you say, he's certainly a good enough batsman to be putting pressure on in all three formats at domestic level for, putting himself in the picture for selection. It seems he's already in the picture for selection. Decent old gig, isn't it? Getting flown around the world for free and maybe playing some cricket, maybe not playing some cricket. It's not the worst, but yeah, I think his traditionally, I think I'm right in saying that his best format in domestic stuff has been Plunket Shield, but I don't see him getting back into the Test team anytime soon, especially not because Will Young is the next man up there. But I don't know, it seems like he's kind of positioned himself as next man up for white ball stuff, and it's continually frustrating to me. And we saw this during this series where they're at a bit of a stage now where they can't really keep just being like white ball cricket versus red ball cricket, because 2020 and ODIs, if you really want to win the World Cup, if you really want to focus on that 2020 World Cup, you do have to differentiate between those two forms, and some guys are better at 2020s and some guys are worse at ODIs, and Colin Munro springs to mind immediately there. And Hamish Rutherford isn't the first guy you'd think of for 2020s, which is why, and it's no real surprise to hear that his Super Smash stuff was the weakest of his three efforts. I think he's a better bet to push in for the ODI team, just in terms of being able to sustain a spot and have some success there. In fact, he might be a good replacement as an opener there. If there's a spot coming up free in that one, he might want to chuck his name in there to apply for that job. But yeah, 2020s, I don't really see him being a guy who can be a factor at the World Cup, but maybe he can be. Maybe he's the new Neil Broom, and he's just going to, for the next couple years, like you say, good core young cricketers pushing their way through, but they're not quite there yet, so it might take a year or two to really force the issue. A couple sustained years of just putting down great scores for guys like Glenn Phillips, Mark Chapman, those types. Devon Conway, I think, isn't eligible till... I might just be pulling this out of my ass here, but I think it's 2021 when he becomes eligible for New Zealand. So, I don't know. Yeah, maybe Hamish Rutherford is the guy who can like bridge the gap between old and new there, and last era and next era, and just have a year or two where he's maybe not first choice, but in the squad and like the next guy when someone is injured, which happens relatively often in shorter form cricket. So I don't know. I think he's just got himself in a nice little nook at the moment where maybe it's just because he's been keen and he's been the guy who answers his phone or whatever, but he's good enough, so I got no dramas with him popping up as a bit of a factor certainly in the ODI team in the 2020s. Again, I think there are a couple. I think you'd do a lot better to have a more specialist mindset about the 2020s, and I don't know that the Blackcaps right now have that. And like we were talking about last time we talked about them, traditionally they just seem to use 2020s as a way to bring guys into the international fold, give them some experience, and then if they're good, push them into the ODIs and maybe even the test team. But at the moment, if you want to prioritize this as a format, if you want to win the World Cup, you can't really be doing that. And we saw that during the series, didn't we? Because a couple guys like Seth Rance springs to mind immediately, who has been a benefactor, or guy who has benefited from whatever the bloody phrase is, from that kind of mindset, suddenly is saying, all right, I'm not maybe a natural 2020 player, and I got pumped a couple times during the series and it wasn't great. But yeah, however they want to do it, like, swing back to Hamish Rutherford, he's in a nice position, I think, for a guy like Hamish Rutherford, because you don't always get those second chances at internationals when you've been there and fallen out before.
Another interesting little cricketer is Ish Sodhi, considering Ish Sodhi took 1 wicket at an average of 57 and conceded 8.14 runs per over. He only bowled 7 overs, but even Seth Rance, he took 3 wickets, so he still somehow managed to take 3 wickets despite conceding 10.9 runs an over. And with Nolan,
I think he was quite good in that second T20, Seth Rance.
Yeah, and it's more about the historical work of Ish Sodhi in the T20 arena has been fantastic. He's a dominant force in T20 cricket for Aotearoa, for the Blackcaps, but for whatever reason in this series, he only took 1 wicket. And I mean, Todd Astle came in for 1 game and took 3 wickets and proved to be more effective. I would suggest that Sri Lanka would have prepared far more for Ish Sodhi than Todd Astle, and I believe they would have done a whole lot of homework on how to deal with Ish Sodhi, considering that Sri Lanka faced Ish Sodhi in T20 and ODI cricket in Aotearoa last summer. So I do think that has something to do with it. And even though he only took 1 wicket and averaged 57, his year average, he's only played 6 games, so 3 games here, 3 games back earlier in the year, and his year average this year is 24.85, which is actually still pretty handy. Last year he averaged 37, which isn't handy. That's not Ish Sodhi standards in T20 cricket, because 2014 averaged 25, 2015 averaged 14, 2016 averaged 13, 2017 averaged 14. Like, those are freakish T20 bowling numbers. And then 2018, he played the most games that he's ever played in a year. He played 13 games. Whereas most other years he's played 6 or only a few. And it was just, when we're thinking about Ish Sodhi, didn't really play a whole lot at the World Cup, which might have dented the confidence, and now going to Sri Lanka and not really being too effective in the T20 series. He looks to be down the pecking order in the Test series. But what a lot of people perhaps wouldn't recognise about Ish Sodhi, and this again goes back into the previewing the Plunket Shield summer, is that Ish Sodhi was the leading wicket taker in the Plunket Shield last summer. He took 36 wickets at an average of 24.97. And Sodi has consistently been one of the best bowlers in the 4-day format in Aotearoa. So how did you view Sodi's international work over the past few months? And then I think he's another candidate for someone who could grab a bit of momentum their way with a really dominant start to the Plunket Shield.
Yeah, not just a dominant start to the Plunket Shield, but like that run of 2020s that we have over the home summer as well, which is going to be, there's opportunities to roll through all these guys. So someone like Sodi should get a lot of overs under his belt, which has obviously been a factor for a guy who has to play a lot of 2020s around the world. Like he doesn't bowl that many overs, and it's not really the best for him. And that's why Plunket Shield has been so useful and so insightful as well to see him taking so many wickets there. So he's in a situation where, Mitchell Santner had an excellent series against Sri Lanka and kind of took the buzz as a spinner, and so Sodi got pushed a little bit to the side and then didn't play the third game, which is understandable because Todd Astle was around for the entire tour from the start and hadn't done anything until now. So, you got to give him at least one game, and he took 3 wickets. So I guess that means 3 wickets in a meaningless 2020 at the end of a series that we'd already won probably guarantees his position in the next test squad, which he won't play in, but will be in the squad, taking up a spot that could be used on someone else because that's the way that the selections tend to work at the moment for the Blackcaps. So, hey, fair play to Todd Astle doing what he does and continuing to just hang on in there. Yeah, that's interesting about 2018 as well, because Sodi, the thing with him is it's always felt like he just doesn't get enough support. Like, he should just get a good run in the ODI team and we'll see like a guy who could blossom into a world-class bowler. But then to demand that you also need to come in and take your small opportunities, your rare opportunities, you got to dominate and demand more. So while he does that at a lower level, he also has these little series sometimes where it's like 1 wicket and 2 2020s against Sri Lanka, and it's a little bit forgettable, which you don't want to be when you're that guy on the fringe, like who's getting games but not enough games, and you want to be playing as many as possible. You need to be like demanding that of the selectors, of the coach, of the captains. But yeah, it's just sometimes when you only play 2 games, it's a maximum of 8 overs. I don't even know that he got through all those 8 overs, so it's like it's such a small sample size, and that's the problem with 2020, which, it's hard. It makes it hard to make judgments from a series like this when someone hasn't even played every game. So, it's like Munro in 2020s. Like the numbers are on the board. Like the quality is there and proven in this format, if not as much in the other 2 formats, but certainly in 2020s he has proven to be a world-class bowler at times in the past. So, like, you don't need to panic. You don't need to make mass changes because of one series, I should think. But like you say, there is that momentum coming off a World Cup where he didn't play as often as maybe he should have, as maybe he could have. And that's a little bit concerning because that same momentum, it's a bit different from Munro, who did play and didn't perform. So that momentum, even though it's a different format and should be kept separate, the fact is, like, he has come off a negative aspect to come into another negative aspect, and that adds up in the minds of fans for sure. I suspect in the minds of selectors as well. Certainly the way they pick the team, they seem to be looking at all formats. So yeah, it's not ideal, but I think Sodi's still in a better position than a couple of those other guys, to be honest. He's surely still ahead of Todd Astle in the pecking order. If he isn't, after that one game from Astle, which didn't even count really, and we still lost, I would be flabbergasted. But stranger things have happened.
Yeah, and it's what you said about how difficult it is to make the judgments from that T20 series. That is exactly why I'm bringing up the Plunket Shield, because that's the next phase of Kiwi cricket. And I think it's just going to be very interesting, especially for those dudes who are far more likely to play white ball cricket for New Zealand at the moment than Test cricket. I'm just fascinated by what they do in Plunket Shield because, we've just seen Sodi leading wicket taker Plunket Shield last summer. Colin Munro is fantastic in the Plunket Shield. And I just want to see what those kind of dudes, I'm not sure who else is in that bracket. Maybe someone like Lockie Ferguson, how he starts the summer in Plunket Shield if he is fit and healthy. Someone like Jimmy Neesham, who was strangely left out of the Tour de Sri Lanka. Yeah, maybe those 4 dudes. I'm just very interested in how they start the summer in Plunket Shield and what level of dominance they can offer.
Yeah, we might have to do a preview podcast of the Plunket Shield coming up, eh? We did one once before, I remember, so yeah, that's not a bad idea. Lockie Ferguson's Plunket Shield form pretty much got him into the ODI team, which is another example of the cross-format thing point of views. But yeah, I don't really know how to change Gavin Larson's mind at this point. But I mean, I think Ferguson is he's certainly going to get an opportunity in the Test team, hopefully against England. And those 5 2020s against England are going to give an opportunity as well to a lot of guys to begin to stake a claim, because now is when you do that. Like, now is when you want to sort through those players and see who are we going to invest in over the next 12 months following this, because there is a World Cup coming up and we want to win this World Cup. And I that's why I sort of see this series against Sri Lanka as a transitional point, because that old focus of just using this as an example of getting people experience in international cricket, suddenly you have to really focus. You don't. It doesn't happen at once, but over the next, hopefully next few 2020 series that we have, and I think they play 5 against India as well, which is just a mind-boggling number of international 2020s. And even with a World Cup, I don't really see the point of that, but. Okay, whatever. If they get crowds, they make money, and if they make money, we get to see more cricket one way or another. So whatever. But yeah, I would like to see a lot more people get an opportunity and get different guys just a little taste. Like, even if it's not enough to judge them from, we do need to start sort of streamlining this process. But before you streamline it, you got to sort of open it up again. So. It's funny where 2020 internationals are now something we can actually talk about because of the context of this World Cup. It's weird that there's suddenly a focus to it, but I would like to see against England and against India and beyond, I would like to see that focus sharpen up a bit more and actually start looking at how do we form a team that can win games, and how do we orchestrate a strategy that will win us 2020 games. What aspects of this sport are the most I picked up a used copy of that, that book Moneyball, and I'm going to start reading that at some point. And I suspect, I was thinking about it from what I know about the whole, the Oakland Athletics and whatever, and that whole line of thinking, and the way that sort of over-analytical approach has been quite influential in a lot of other sports. And I was listening to a guy who's written on one of the podcasts talking about, German fellow who's written a book about analytics and football, and the different ways that can open it up. I suspect that 2020 analytics, and from a Moneyball perspective, from that whole thing of these are players who the storyline of their careers don't match up with what they could be, they're in a bad situation, or being able to identify the players who could come off at the right time, because baseball is quite a if you average 300, it's .300, then you're doing well, because you hit, and that's only getting 3 hits out of 10. You're going to be one of the best guys in the league in the season if you're doing that. So you're looking at weird tosses of the coins, where sometimes a guy's just in a bad situation and failing. And I suspect that 2020s would be that kind of the one aspect of cricket where you could really open it up to that weird, outlandish kind of out of the box thinking of, this guy only needs to be good for 4 overs and he knows how to bowl a Yorker. So while he's rubbish at everything else, maybe we can mold him into a guy who can help us within our team strategy of winning a 2020 kind of thing. And I don't have much faith that the Blackcaps are going to get that deep, and maybe that's a good thing that they wouldn't get that deep about thinking about this. But it is a bit of an unexplored territory, how 2020s and the culture of 2020s and how to win these 2020s, because they've it's new and it's been pretty hit and giggle up until this point. But World Cups, man, you want to win them.
I don't know. You've kind of lost me. I mean, you're mentioning streamlined Blackcaps selection. You're talking about highly
It's a bit science fiction, eh?
highly analytical Blackcaps selection. None of those things go in any way with what we've seen from the Blackcaps selectors. So while you are happy to explore your fantasies, wildcard, I can't believe we'll see any level of streamlining or analytical approach to Blackcaps selection.
No, well, do you think? I mean, they're trying to pick a squad eventually that can win the 2020 World Cup, but I don't know. Do you think we're going to actually see like a bit of bringing in some 2020 specialists and looking at those kind of things? Like, surely you got to at least get somewhere towards that end goal.
No, because as you said earlier, they use T20 cricket for bringing in the fringe players. Well, I'm just struggling to think of anyone who would be a good example right now, but there are players who are T20 specialists around the world from New Zealand. Someone like Anton Devcic, for example, plays around the world, professional T20 player, would appear, I'm not saying he should be, but on the surface, he is the type of player who you would look at as a possible contributor to the Blackcaps T20 team. Now, I'm not saying he should be in there because, you got Mitchell Santner, who's kind of a better version. But that type of player should get a look in. But what they do instead is use it as a development tool for other players. So I'm not convinced that we're going to see a highly specialized T20 group. I think they just believe that the cricketers they have are good enough to make the adjustments.
The irony of that is that's actually the correct way to do things for 3 out of 4 years. That using 2020 is just a bit of a like introduction. It's an international, but it's only kind of like half international. It's not the same. That's actually probably the right way to do it. Well, when you don't have that World Cup looking forward to, it's just that at this right moment if they're not building towards the World Cup, then why are they playing so many 2020s? And if they're playing so many 2020s, you might as well try to achieve something out of them because no one really wants them at the expense of ODI cricket. Not after a World Cup when we've just seen like the absolute best and also coincidentally the most devastating. But specifically, we'll focus on the best part of it, like the best of what ODI cricket can be. Like there's no 2020 in history that's ever come up with the drama, the just sheer like captivating wonder of that World Cup final and even the World Cup semi-final when we beat India. Like the spectacle of that was incredible, and you will never get that from a 2020, but there is a 2020 World Cup. So in my mind, you're either trying to win it or you're taking the piss, because this is way too many 2020. Like we play another, what is it? We just played 3 there. We got 5 against England. Then we got 5 against India, I believe, and that's before we ever play another ODI. Next ODI is the 5th of February against India. So we play 13, after coming off that World Cup, we play 13 2020 internationals before we play another ODI. And if you're not using that for some good and trying to win that 2020 World Cup, then what are we even doing here, basically? Like, what are we even doing here, Doc, if that's not the focus?
Yeah, and to wrap it up, that sets the scene for a very interesting summer, because the way I talked about the Blackcaps T20 team before throwing it back to you was based on the 3 out of the 4 years of that T20 cycle that you're talking about. Now, it's been a while since we had the last World T20, so it's not an exact 3 and 4 year thing. But what we've seen in the past few years from the Blackcaps T20 group was using it as a development tool because there isn't that context. Now everything has changed. We do have that context, and we've got ample opportunity to assess. Like for us, as the niche case, we have ample opportunity. We have a large sample size ahead of us from which we can either celebrate the planning and preparation for the World T20, or we can be critical of the lack of planning and preparation for a major tournament. There is a trend here. Champions Trophy, planning preparation non-existent. World Cup, they made the final, planning and preparation not very present. So now it's World T20, we've got plenty of T20 games coming up, and we can just kind of see what the selectors and the Blackcaps are up to with their T20 group, because I think it's just going to be interesting to see and break down the T20 team with that planning preparation context around it as well.
Super pumped for that Plunket Shield season though. 4 more weeks.
4 more weeks indeed, Wildcard. You can read about your association's squad contract list. I've done a full rundown of the contracted player list, like a preview for every single association: Auckland Aces, Central Districts Stags, Northern Districts Knights, Wellington Firebirds, Canterbury and Otago Volts. So go check those out on the blog thing. And we'll be all over domestic cricket. You know how we do it here at the Niche Case. Kia kaha, stay beautiful, help each other, and we'll be back sometime, maybe tomorrow, to do a rugby league preview of finals week 1, and also NRL women's starting up this weekend as well. So cheer. See you next time.